Church, say, open the eyes. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. Oh, I want to see you. To see you, to see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we say,
Easy enough? At least the chorus. We got a verse, we got some other stuff, but let's start with that. So, my show. Give us a beat. Okay, love the Lord. Love the Lord with all of your heart and all your soul and mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love Jesus has loved you. Love the Lord with all of your heart and all your soul and mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love as Jesus has loved you. Here's the verse. Jesus taught us three things we should keep remembering. Commandments for living. Those are what we're singing. Sing it with me. Love the Lord with all of your heart, all your soul and mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love as Jesus has. Love the Lord with all of your follow his example. Love the Lord with all of your heart and all your soul and mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love as Jesus has loved you. Oh, again. Love the Lord with all of your heart and all your soul and mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love as Jesus has loved you. Okay, this part goes pretty fast, but it's very repetitive, so hopefully you can catch on to this. With all your heart, with all your hands, with all your breath, breathing, love the Lord. With all your mind, thinking, with all your mouth speaking, with all your eyes seeing, love the Lord. With all your arms reaching, with all your feet screaming, with all your blood bleeding, love the Lord. With all your last meaning, with all your hopes dreaming, with all of your being. Sing that again. With all your heart beating, with all your soul screaming, with all your breath breathing, love the Lord. With all your mind thinking, with all your mouth speaking, with all your seeing, love the Lord. With all your arms reaching, with all your feet speeding, with all your blood bleeding, love the Lord. With all your last meaning, with all your hopes dreaming, with all of your being, love the Lord. Love the Lord with all of your heart and all your soul and mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love as Jesus has loved you. Oh, love the Lord with all of your heart and all your soul and mind and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love as Jesus. Love as Jesus. Love as Jesus has loved you. Yes, again. Love as Jesus has loved you. Woo! Higher than the mountains that I face, stronger than the power of the grave. We're constant in the trial and the change. This one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. can trust your love. Take my heart. Take my heart, lay it down at the feet of you whose crown. Take my life, letting go, lift it out to you whose throne. Sing Take My Heart again. Take my heart, lay it down at the feet of you whose crown. Take my life, letting go, lift it out to you whose throne. I will worship you, Lord, only you, Lord, and I will bow down for you, only you, Lord. So take my friend. So take my friend. Take my fear. All I have, I'm leaving here. Be all my hopes, be all my dreams, be all my delights, be my everything, and I will worship you, Lord, only you, Lord, and I will bow down for you, only you. I worship, and I will worship you, Lord, only you, Lord, and I will bow down for you, only you, It's just you and me right now. It's only you and me right now. It's just you and me right now. It's only you, Lord, and I will worship you, Lord, only you, Lord, and I will bow down for you, only you, be all my hopes, be all my dreams, be all my delights, be my everything. Sing that again. Be all my hopes, be all my hopes, be all my dreams, be all my delights, my everything. Most important thing in Faithful is the Lord, faithful is the Lord, and always good. Faithful is the Lord, faithful is the Lord, faithful is the Lord, and always good.
Chapter 4, verse 1. Although I hope to come to you soon, I am writing you these instructions so that, if I am delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. Beyond all question, the mystery from which true godliness springs is great. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, was preached among the nations, was believed on in the world, was taken up in glory. The Spirit clearly says that in later times, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. This is the word of the Lord.
We're going to go back to what we were doing before the summer, which we were looking at the lives of two men in the Bible. One of them is the Apostle Paul, and then he had this protege named Timothy, and looking at their lives, the relationship and interaction between them. In the Bible, we have some of the writings that Paul wrote to Timothy, and trying to see what we can learn from that. And today, as we heard some of the letter that was 1 Timothy chapter 3 that Paul wrote, and we're talking about being a pillar. So, as we read the Bible, especially with these letters, I want us to be able to read them not like they're an instruction booklet from IKEA, or that they're like some product that was made in Taiwan that then like they said, like, okay, here's some instructions of how you're supposed to do this. But instead, this was a letter with instructions, person to person. It's not just, okay, I'm writing this and I'll 50 people, everyone who just puts it together the same way. It's Paul writing to Timothy with instructions, knowing Timothy, knowing what kind of language he's using for him, knowing his audience. And so we're looking at it from that standpoint, looking into their lives as well as just the words that are written, but who they are. So as we read in 1 Timothy 3:15, that the church is the household of God. And that the church, the Greek word is ecclesia, that it meant just a community. It was used outside of religious contexts as well at the time. And it was just a gathering of people called together for a purpose. And so this church, this gathering of people, this church of the living God, is the pillar and foundation of the truth. So when we think of pillars, a first question would be, what kind of pillars does Paul have in mind, looking at his time frame? Paul is writing about, very likely at that time, temples that had pillars. If you travel around through Greece, Turkey, and that sort of ancient Mediterranean, you see these great columns, and some of them still have the buildings on top, some of them have been ransacked and no longer exist. But while Paul was there, he's walking around seeing pillars that hold up buildings that have a purpose, that serve a purpose. But it wasn't just for holding it up, there's more that we'll look at it. Now Paul, throughout his writing, he uses architectural imagery a lot. He talks about the church being like a house, or being like a pillar, God's firm foundation, you guys are the temple. He uses all of these sort of building words. He certainly uses lots of other imagery, as we've looked through Timothy, where he uses imagery from sports, and imagery from war, and imagery from agriculture. But architecture is definitely one that he uses. Why? Why would that stick out to Paul? So this is where I'm wanting us to sort of look into Paul's head, if we can, and see why would this be meaningful to him, and why might it be meaningful to Timothy, and to the people that Timothy is working with in the city of Ephesus, where Paul was at the time. So the first one, why? Why architecture was important was because, to the Greeks and Romans, that culture, the Hellenistic culture that's around the area, their temples were really a big deal to them. It was like, this is the temple of our city. it was the symbol of who they were. They cared a whole lot about it. I sort of jokingly think it's sort of like if you were saying something bad about the temple, it would be as offensive as making a your mama joke. You know what those are? Those of you who are like football fans, who remember during one special match when Zidane, this famous French football, his last game, and at the end of the match, it's like pretty much done. And he just headbutts this guy in the chest and knocks him over. What we found out later, why he got so angry, was because this other player was saying something about his mama. And so he was so mad that even in his last match, instead of going out there and being like, oh, this great, respectable player has been forever, he's remembered as losing his temper and just knocking this guy flat with a headbutt. Because it was a big deal. You don't talk about my mother that way. Greco-Roman culture had kind of the same thing with their temples. And Ephesus, certainly no less. They had a temple to Artemis. The temple to Artemis, their goddess, they thought that was really important. And if you read through the storyline of Acts, Paul is in Ephesus, and people get really mad at Paul because they start thinking that he said something against Artemis. You said something against our temple goddess? How could you? We have to get a riot. And so there's this huge riot in the city, and everyone comes together. And some of them don't even know why they're there, but they all just start yelling, great is Artemis of the Ephesians! Great is Artemis of the Ephesians! Yeah! Blood! Death! Kill him! Who's the him? I don't know, but he's bad! Because it was a big deal to them. Their temples were a big deal. So Paul writing to Timothy in Ephesus, and he's saying, hey, look, you guys in that culture, you care so much about your temple. Well, guess what temple you're supposed to care about? It's not made out of bricks and stone and mortar and marble. This is made out of you guys. So that's one reason. Another reason why is because housing was sort of like Paul's day job. We don't know exactly all that Paul had done in his work in the past, but we are told in Acts that for a while he works as a tent maker. That's not necessarily making a tent for camping, it's like making tents that people would live in, and it's not the same constructing a tent as it is constructing a huge cathedral or a huge temple or some of those. But I mean, you're working in the same field, you get kind of interested, right? You're like, okay, well how does that work together? How does that, because we have to hold this up with poles, and then you have to make sure that you have the tension correct and tensile strength, and you have to make sure those things work. And so Paul would have at least, just as a normal human being, had interest in how buildings worked because building was some of what he did. I used to work pouring concrete for a couple of months. So a concrete business, and we weren't the ones who ran the concrete machines, but we'd have to do all the digging and then the pouring and then making it flat and all of that. And so I'm interested every now and again in seeing people as they're working with concrete. I have a 2-year-old son that this week, while my wife and my older son were away at VBS, I had my 2-year-old in the mornings. So we went out to playground after playground after playground. One morning, 4 playgrounds. I wore that kid out so he slept good, and it was fun. But he's the type of kid that has the attention span, even at a playground, of, oh, little kid at a playground. He's like, I want to be up on this. Okay, I'm done. No, I'm getting off. Oh, no, don't move back. I want to be on this. No, I want to get off. No, I want to get back out. No, I want to get off this. And it was like, oh, let's climb up here. Oh, Papa, you climb up here. No, Papa, you go back down. No, Papa, you stay up here. No, I'm going down. Here, I take a step off. No, I'm going back on. And I thought I was wearing him out. Sometimes. So as we're walking back one day, we're coming toward my house. We go down this side street that I was like, oh, well, let's walk that way. And he sees a big truck. My son loves big trucks. Like, oh, let's go that way. Okay, we got the time, let's walk that way. And we see that there's a cement mixer that's going. It's one of the big cement trucks, and in the back it's going. And as I'm then walking down the street, we see further there's a second one. There's 2 cement mixers. There's something being worked on. And there's another huge truck that, since I worked with cement pouring, I know what it is. What they're going to do is they're going to back up the cement mixers. They're going to pour cement mixers from that into this other truck that then has this tube that's just a huge black kind of rubberish tube, and it's going to take that all the way. They had extended it probably 40 meters or so into the backyard of someone because the cement trucks themselves were too big to be able to back in. So they had to have this thing that extended it, and it's just this huge, it's not like a crane, but get the idea of like a crane that's just gonna shove, it's gonna pump this concrete all the way over. But if you've ever worked in these sorts of things, I mean, concrete is supposed to set fast, but the people who work concrete don't necessarily work fast. You take your time, you're like, okay, yeah, well, let's look at it. Is it wet enough or is it too dry? Let's put in a little more water. Yeah, spin that a couple more times. Yeah, maybe. So we're in that period of it where I'm walking by and I know this isn't going to be done in like 1 minute. We're not even going to be able to see it being pumped because that's too far back. And we're on the street, I can look on the street, but I'm not just going to walk into someone's yard and be like, hey, so I used to work concrete. Is it okay if I just stand around? Just want a professional courtesy, come on. So the very little bit that we're going to see is the big cement mixer pouring concrete down into the other machine. That happens for about 30 seconds. But Liam is intrigued. He wants to see the cement mixer process. And the boy who's up, down, let's go there, is just still for minutes and minutes and minutes because he just wants to look at this concrete mixer. And he doesn't want to just stand there and look at it. He wants Papa to lift him out. So I'm holding him, and he's just looking, and then finally the moment arrives. Oh, you see the concrete's going down? Yeah. Okay, it's done. Let's go. But I admit, I actually wasn't that bored. Why? Because I'd worked in concrete. It was kind of interesting to me. I know how the process works. I liked it. Paul, I think, was interested in architecture and building things because it's like, oh, I know some of this process. I'd like to learn more. Yeah, that's cool. Good. Yeah. Fine. So that's the second reason why I think he used it. Third one that's maybe most important for what I want to look at today is Paul grew up loving his temple and loving the city of Jerusalem that he lived in. He wasn't born in Jerusalem, but he eventually moved there, and he called himself an Israelite of Israelites. He said, I was hardcore in my faith. And part of that included all of this law about the times of going to the temple and having these celebrations and going there several times a year. And Paul's like, as far as following that law, I was good at it. I did it. So Paul truly would have had this thing where he cared about Jerusalem. He would have very likely prayed for Jerusalem, as it says in the book of Psalms. As a Pharisee, he believed all those things. He had all of that. So he grew up as someone who really loved where he was going. It was part of his roots. It was just a part of his city. And I think he just had a deep love for the place. I don't know if you've ever known anyone who had a deep love for a place, like their hometown. It's often their hometown, sometimes not. I kind of grew up with that. I wasn't born in St. Joseph, Missouri, but we moved there, and most of my growing up was there. And even when I've been away, when I would go back, like I did have those moments of like I cared about the city. I don't know, something about the place. It's my hometown. And yet through the years, all these things that were part of my identity growing up, the church I went to, the school I went to, the house I lived in, the road we drove, all of those things have changed and continue to change to where it kind of feels like God sort of took those roots out of my heart a bit at a time. Not that I don't care about the place, but to go back there, it's just not quite the same. And God has moved me on to a city like Maastricht, where now like this is where I'm kind of getting that heart love toward. I feel like God sort of did the same thing with Paul. Paul, who had this like, I care so much about Jerusalem, I care about the temple, and we have to do this worship right. We have to be focused on making sure that we do this right. That God, over time, started to change his heart. And that's what we're going to look at with this pillar thing. But before we quite get into that, so Paul had grown up and had been in the temple tons of times and had loved it. Have you ever gone to some place with a friend of yours that like that's where they're from, that's their hometown, that's their place? And how different it is to see a city through a friend's eyes? Have you ever had that? Because you can go as a tourist and see things, but that's different than going with someone who knows it well. Now, Timothy, growing up, as far as we know, probably never went to Jerusalem before he went with Paul. Because when Paul first finds Timothy, Timothy, though a Jewish man, was uncircumcised. Which, if his mother and grandmother were at least good enough in being Jewish women, they wouldn't take this uncircumcised man into the Jewish temple. That wasn't how that was supposed to work. So likely, Timothy had never been in the temple, never been to Jerusalem before he went with Paul. And I just wonder what that's like. It's not necessarily a great biblical lesson to learn, but it's just an interesting thought of what would that have been like for Timothy to be walking along with Paul and hearing him tell these stories. Oh yeah, around that corner, that's where we did this or that. Oh, not all those would be happy stories for Paul by now, because Paul would be able to go, yeah, I remember that house because I dragged Christians out of there back in the day. A few of them ended up dying, some of them ended in jail, a few of them recanted. I kind of want to find them right now and tell them, what were you doing? I'm so sorry, but never let go of Jesus. Like these types of stories, these things that Paul would just be able to tell Timothy of the temple and the sacrifices and those moments where he's like, oh, I remember that smell. Have you ever had those moments where you're like, I remember that smell? There's something that just jogs your mind from years ago. Oh, wow, it feels like. Timothy would have had that with Paul, getting to hear those kinds of stories. So I believe Paul cared about it. It's been different for me when I visited places. I remember going to the Maastricht caves. If you've ever been to the caves in Maastricht, you can go on a tour. And there's a difference when the tour guide is a 22-year-old or when it's like an 82-year-old. One time we had one of the older men, and he was like, yeah, we used to play here when we were kids, before they closed it off. We ran around, and our mothers always told us, like, if you get lost, you're gonna die, but we knew our way, we were okay. It was so interesting to hear this guy who had grown up loving these caves and could show us around in the dark. So cool. This is different when you have that sort of experience. So Timothy, from hearing that and seeing that, I think would understand the huge switch that happened in Paul's life. From going the Jerusalem temple to the church being the temple. The people of God being the temple. So, I wanted to have you a pillar today. We have created a pillar, I with the help of my friend. I'll just name him Pillar. So, pillar is not a thing, the pillar is a person. I want you to remember that. Pillar is a person. What do you think of our beautiful pillar? So, Timothy would understand that there's this huge switch. And there's two ones that I want to look at. Number one, that Paul said, the church is where the truth of God is found. The truth of God would be on this pillar. It said the church is the pillar, the foundation of the truth. Now the pillar wasn't just something that held a building up, that you had, okay, this is holding the building. It was also a place where they would write stuff down. Where they would etch things. That's why if you go to these pillars and you see, oh, there's this inscription of a Roman governor, or there's this drawing, and this picture of this historical battle, all these things. But that was also used where you would just get out news and information. People know, okay, if I want to find out what's going on in Artemisdom, you go to the Artemis Temple, and you look around on the pillars, because the pillars are where there's going to be stuff written down. So the church is where the truth is supposed to be found. It's supposed to be written down. So, church is where we find out Jesus is King. Because that would be some of the important news of the day. You want people to know He's passing along Jesus, not this guy in Rome who thinks he's all important as a Caesar, but Jesus is King. I'm just going to write it all out. This is great. Tell how easily I can write because you're so muscled. Crowd totally expected me to say that. So to learn God's message to His people and to the world, the church was meant to be the bearers of that truth. They were supposed to show that It was supposed to be visible. It was supposed to be obvious. You could go to the pillar, the church, and find out that information. And the pillar was what used to be an ethnic group in Paul's mind. The pillar was, you have the temple, you have the Jewish people. And Paul's idea of that pillar, it started to switch. It wasn't this ethnic group, it was the people who had willingly attached themselves to Jesus. And Timothy would have seen that switch and how that worked. Because Paul, being a Pharisee, knew about the whole synagogue system, and they would go around the synagogues. And so as we read through the book of Acts, Paul, when he goes into a city, he will first look for the synagogue. He would look for the Jewish people because he loved his people, and he wanted to tell them the truth about Jesus. And Timothy saw in so many places how that didn't always work. Timothy saw Paul's frustrations. When they went to Thessalonica, the Jews ran Paul out of there. And then they go to Berea, and the Jews there are starting good, and that's going along well until the Thessalonians join them, and then the Bereans just go, oh yeah, well, let's kick them out too. And so they run Paul out again. Timothy would have known and probably been there for the times in Corinth and in Ephesus. When Paul starts talking with the Jews, he starts in the synagogue, but then we're told that those people either start opposing or abusing or maligning Paul. So Paul will shake his clothes out and say, fine, I am going to the other ethnicities as well. I'm going to the Gentile people. And he would leave the synagogue and move either into a Gentile's house or move into a lecture hall. So Timothy saw, as the switch is happening in Paul's mindset of where the truth is found is not where there's an ethnic group of people per se. Where the truth is found is where those who are telling the truth about Jesus, which is his church, that's where it's supposed to be shown and found. And it's in the people in the group. That was something that was interesting to me, even to see Paul's kind of shift, or at least his wording, through his writings. The only other time where he uses the same word for pillar is in the book of Galatians, which was probably one of Paul's, if not Paul's first letter that we have recorded. And in there, he talks about going to Jerusalem and talking with those that were esteemed to be pillars. Peter, James, these apostles. And so he's listing the pillars as super important people in the church. And then now that he gets to 1 Timothy, which is one of his last ones, the pillars aren't the super important people. The pillars are all the people. The pillars, those showing the truth, are not just apostles and prophets. Though they have their place in the whole building of God, he talks about them being part of the foundation. He doesn't neglect that. He says the pillars, the ones showing forth that, aren't just the speakers, aren't just the pastors, aren't just the elders, aren't just the apostles or prophets or evangelists. It's God's church. It's all of his people that are showing that. The church is where the truth of God is found, and not per se in the old Hebraic law that he grew up with. That doesn't discount the law of love, which is actually contained in the Hebraic law. And so I want to talk a bit about that. Because Paul would have grown up with this: we follow the law, and if you're following the law and the traditions that have been passed down, you're doing it right. And his mind starts to change about what focus of the law, and especially how that works with the temple. Not because God changed, but because Paul's mind starts to change. So as we sang this morning, it was very intentional. We're putting that song in that has these 3 commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love as Jesus has loved you. Cha-cha-cha-cha. I like the song. So the first 2 parts of that, to love God with all you have and to love your neighbor as yourself, those are written as part of the old Hebraic law. That wasn't new. That isn't new. God hadn't changed. And when Jesus says, I give you a new commandment, love as I have loved you, in a way that's not even completely new. It's still the idea of love. Jesus is just making it clear. When we're talking about love, this is what I mean. It's what I do. And as I thought about Jesus' sacrifice this week, there was this imperfect analogy that came to mind. All analogies are imperfect. This one is too, so it doesn't match everything. But maybe this will help you in understanding what God is looking for. I have 2 sons. One of those sons just bites the other one sometimes. The younger one bites the older one. He just gets excited and he bites him. And sort of the two things that we tell them often to do is, okay, say you're sorry and do the apologizing process, and then don't do that again. Now treat him kind, show him love. So there's the apology part of it, and there's the go live this out afterward, change the way that you're living. Both of those are important. And here's the thing, he's getting better at saying sorry, but he's not stopping biting his brother sometimes. Doesn't happen every day, and there are things that we can probably do to help it, but he will still do that. And I think with the Old Testament law, what sometimes happened was people got so focused on the I'm sorry, I apologize, which was the sacrificial system, but didn't necessarily do the moral part of the law, which is go love your neighbor as yourself, and then all these other things where that gets spelled out. And so consider with my two sons, if as they grow up and as they continue, okay, there's the sorry part and there's the actually change part. And then let's just get really good at the sorry part. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to learn how to say sorry in multiple languages. We're going to teach these other people and make sure that they know how to say sorry in the original language, because if you say it in the original language, it's better. And then they start teaching other people how to say sorry. Now, number one, some of the best ways to say sorry, you have to have emotion. So we're going to work on how your face works. You got to be able to show enough sadness, but you may not want to overdo it. You got to have some crying, but not too much. Maybe just misting at the eyes. Another really good way to say sorry, music. We're going to learn how to sing songs all about how we say sorry. We're going to get the songs down right. We're going to get speakers to come in and talk about how we say sorry. That way we can say sorry the best possible. We'll get some people that are especially sorry leaders. You guys are the sorry leaders. We'll pay you a lot for that. We get the whole sorry thing down. And think that you're doing what I asked you to do because I said, say sorry and change what you're doing. So what if I'm seeing my sons going through this process? They're getting so focused on the sorry, and so I come up with an idea and say, this is what we're going to do, boys. Your father is once and for all going to say the eternal sorry so that you don't have to say sorry again. You don't have to worry about the whole sorry part. We're going to just take out all the extra added stuff on the sorry, not worrying about the sorry, so that you are free now to just go love your brother, not do the mean stuff you were doing before, because you're getting way too focused on this one end. So let's free you from that. Let's make it eternally sorry is done. In a way, I think that's some of what the cross was meant to do. There's so much more to it than that. But in a way, to have the sacrifice system, you guys are getting a little more focused on the sacrifices. You're selling what makes the perfect sacrifice, and you have to have the right lamb, and you have to do all these things, and you have to make sure that all that part is right, but they're not living it out of actually loving their neighbor. So he says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the perfect eternal sacrifice, so you're not focusing on the sacrifice anymore. You're focusing on showing the love that has to happen in community, has to happen with people. So Jesus fulfilled the law, but wanted people to keep living out love truly. And the concern with Paul in his earlier life, before he was changed as a Pharisee, was he fell into those things of not being focused on the love aspect of it, not being the pillar as he was supposed to be. So one part is that the church is where the truth of God is found. This is where we see the command of the law of love. Because the church was supposed to be showing that. They were the ones living this out. They were the ones showing this is what loving in your family looks like. This is what loving in community looks like. This is what masters and slaves learning to actually love instead of be focused on their cultural setting look like. This is how we treat one another. The second thing was the church is where the life of God is found, or the presence of God is found. Before that part, growing up, the whole idea would have been the temple is where the Holy of Holies is, where God's presence is most known and seen, where it is supposed to live. But then Paul writes things to the Ephesians, where Timothy is working, and says, you all who were Gentiles before, you're no longer strangers and foreigners. You're citizens with all God's holy people. You're members of the family, and together we are his house, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, and the cornerstone is Jesus Christ himself. And we're carefully joined together in him, becoming a holy temple for the Lord. Through him, you Gentiles also are being made part of this dwelling where God lives by his Spirit. God now lived in the church. God now lived in these groups of people, in these gatherings that were coming together. The presence of God, through the Spirit of God, because these church people were getting inspirited with the Spirit of God. That's where you could find God's presence. And that gets echoed not just in Paul, but in other runs. The writer of Hebrews says, we are his house. And it gets echoed by Jesus in Revelations 3 when he's talking to the church in Philadelphia and says, you all, those who are victorious, those who will remain steadfast, will become pillars in the house of my God. And I will write on them the name of my God, and I will also write on them my new name. So having these pillars that were written on, saying this is what happens to those who are firm. And I'll write my name on it. Now, if you've seen some of these old pillars, or if you've gone through caves, or if you've seen etched into old trees, or written on playground equipment, as I said, I spent a lot of time around playground equipment, people like to write stuff on things. People like to etch stuff into things that they can, right? And so, there are two main things that people write, I would say, and I think this is part of it. When Jesus says, I will etch my name on him. So one of the things that people like to write is just something talking about their presence. Like, Billy was here. Bob was here. So, I think that's also part of, and we have to put a date to it. Let's put 33, AD 33. Jesus was here. People just like to let it be known that they were there. And so they'll write on these pillars, or they'll write on walls, I was here. That's part of what the pillar of the church is supposed to be, is we're supposed to be like Jesus has written on us, Jesus was here. Jesus existed. God came down into our vicinity. He lived among us. Emmanuel. So that's a way that the church is like a pillar, is we get etched on by Jesus, I was here. And the church that has stuck around through centuries, through millennium, that is still supposed to have that etching written on us about how Jesus was here. So that's one way that people use etchings on things. The other one is always, I gotta show my love, right? Bobby, hearts, Jody, or whatever. So, the church is also that picture. People can get that. We're going to do God, hearts, world. For those of you who know your John 3:16, for God so loved the world that Jesus was here, so that whoever would believe in him would not have to perish, but would receive everlasting life. So that's part of this etching on the church, that the church is this pillar of God because we're supposed to show that God loves the world. That we are his pillar where if you want to go find out the truth about God, it's finding out that he loved so much that Jesus was here. That he sent his son. We're supposed to be showing that. That's who we're supposed to be. So as we walk around as pillars in our society, people are supposed to see the presence of God and his enduring love etched into us. Amen? Amen. I was talking with a friend about amening this week. I was talking with my mom yesterday, and looking at my sons and saying, oh, what are they like? What was I like as a kid? And one of the things that she said to me was this. As a child, you used to be more sentimental about things. But now, would you say that you're more sentimental about people? And her feeling was yes, which I think is a good thing. But it's that switch, and I think that is what happened with Paul. When he was young, he was sentimental about places. He was sentimental about things. He was sentimental about rules, which, yes, people can be that way. I totally was as a kid. You get sentimental about making sure you have your control and your space. But then Paul started to go through this switch because of the Holy Spirit living inside of him, realizing Jesus was real and the forgiveness he'd been offered, to where Paul started being sentimental about people. Paul started realizing the temple, the pillar, it's not stone, it's not marble, it's us, it's people, it's guys like Josh. He's doing great. Who are living out the story that Jesus was here. And that Jesus, is this a photo op? That Jesus was here and that God loved the world through that. So, your Timothy task. I want to give you something practical to follow through on this lesson. Timothy task for this week. There's kind of two parts to it. One of those is to thank or encourage someone who showed you the truth. Someone who was this pillar of the truth that showed you that. Maybe that's a family member, a friend, it could be in various different ways. But who was someone that showed you especially spiritual truth? And write them a letter or give them a phone call or something like that to thank and encourage them for doing that in your life. The second part is about you being someone who does that for them. So pray for and then offer to discuss faith with someone that you know. You don't have to start by giving them the whole story. Sometimes that can be hard in a work environment or in people who are living in your house if you're a student that lives with various people. But to say, if you ever want to have a conversation about faith, I'd be glad to. Even something like that lets people know if they want to come find out about the message, they know where the pillar is. They know where they can go to go find the pillar that has information about this goddess. When you have the goddess of Artemis, not everyone went to the temple to find out. It was fine. They could choose, but they at least knew if I want to find out about Artemis, that's where I go. Well, for those who want to find out about God, for those that want to find out about Jesus Christ, they need to know where the temple is. And the temple is not them finding out about the MECC being in Forum 100, but you have to enter from a different direction because Forum is closed. It's them finding out that the pillar is God's people. It's finding out you are part of that pillar, and that's where they can go to find out more information about this God who has loved them and who has been present here. So go be that for someone else. I can tell you one of the ways I'm planning on doing it, just finding out. So yesterday I saw on Facebook that there's a slam poetry spoken word thing tomorrow night. So I wrote to him and signed up and said, hey, yeah, I'd be willing to do that. I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. But to be able to go tell something about Jesus in poetry form, because that's something I enjoy. Like, well, I'm here. If people want to throw tomatoes at me, fine. But if people want to ask someone about faith, they'll know, oh my goodness, there's a Christian that lives in this city. Well, we can talk to him. So you can find creative ways to do it. But follow through with that second one. Pray for opportunities and take the opportunity to at least make yourself available for people to read you like a book. Because Paul also wrote that to us. We are God's letter. It's been etched on for the world to see.